why is it that Mike Zimmer is on any kind of a hot seat? Because I look at Mike Zimmer and I see a guy who, well, first of all, there's only one Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick,
Right.
if Bill Belichick is the holy grail of coach hires. So if you're hiring and firing or judging based on Bill Belichick as a barometer, your premise is flawed.
Right. It's not a fair bar to set.
Right. There's only one Bill Belichick.
The Patriots are not the comp.
No,
exactly.
It's the greatest franchise.
Take them off the table.
Because you could sit there all day and say, well, we got to compete with the Patriots. So you get 3 years to prove you're Belichick and then you're fired. But let's not do that. That's foolish. So of all the non-Bill Belichick coaches, among coaches with at least 3 years experience, and I know I'm taking Sean McVay off the board unfairly, so you could put Sean McVay in here because I think Sean McVay is pretty well established as a really, really good coach after 2 years. But among coaches with at least 3 years experience, only Doug Peterson, Sean Payton, Pete Carroll, Mike Tomlin, and Andy Reid have better winning percentages than Mike Zimmer. So that alone, if you just took that alone, and obviously put Bill Belichick on that list too, if you said, hey, just winning percentage flat out, it's been 5 years for Mike Zimmer, here's the company that he belongs in, or here is like these guys are the only ones above him, based on that alone, would you say hot seat or no? I think you would instantly say no. Why would you ever think about removing Mike Zimmer as coach or not giving him an extra year on his contract?
The answer to your question is because when expectations have been high, the Vikings with Mike as coach have not met them. That's why.
Okay, but is that a fair enough critique? Okay, expectations are high. Like we want the Vikings to win the Super Bowl, right? And they haven't. Mm-hmm. We want them to go to a Super Bowl, and they haven't. And to me, I need more evidence or more before I'm ready to say, all right, on to the next. I need to know what's behind door number 2. Because if I'm saying, okay, Mike Zimmer's not Bill Belichick, and maybe he's not Sean Payton, and he still has some work to do to become Andy Reid, who's been doing this for 20 years at a high level, also doesn't have a Super Bowl.
Right.
Doesn't mean I'm going to give up a guy in that second tier for something unknown and anonymous behind door number 2.
And I get what you're saying, but there are things that, because we're not talking about him automatically being fired here, but we are talking about meeting expectations that they didn't meet in 2000. I believe it was 16 coming off 15 and in 18 coming off 17. And I do think that there have been some areas of question when it comes to things like Norv Turner, DeFilippo, the issues in Green Bay late in, what was that, the 2016 season. So I think that's why. And that does not mean he's going to be fired. But I do think that those things turn up the pressure. I also think that's why it's smart to bring in Kubiak now to basically say, Mike, we've seen the potential weakness here. When you need to get involved in offense, it doesn't work. Defensively, you are very good. Sure. You can say what you want about them not succeeding in big games, blah, blah, blah. But defensively, this is a very good team. But I think that there are question marks that certainly cause you to pause at times and say that there's a reason why the pressure increases. That does not mean he's fired.
So the biggest question, I'm not saying he's perfect, but you could nitpick a lot of these guys. Okay, Sean Payton oversaw the worst defense in the NFL for 3 years and basically helped waste 3 years of Drew Brees' prime. And then they kind of fixed it. They came back. So all these guys, besides Bill Belichick, you could point out flaws in. I think the biggest flaw for Mike Zimmer is the fact that he hasn't had the same quarterbacks as some of these other coaches. So the list of coaches I gave you guys, and let's put Bill Belichick back on it for a second. Quarterbacks named Russell Wilson, named Ben Roethlisberger, named Drew Brees, Tom Brady are linked and handcuffed to these coaches. Pat Mahomes with Andy Reid, right? And even Alex Smith, but Pat Mahomes, it helps to have this generationally great quarterback. So Mike Zimmer with 4 different starting quarterbacks in 5 years, none of them considered to be top 10 quarterbacks, unless you think Kirk Cousins or Sam Bradford or Teddy Bridgewater or Case Keenum are top 10 quarterbacks. I think all those guys are considered more league average type quarterbacks, right? He's got 2 division championships in a division with Aaron Rodgers in those 5 years, and 3 consecutive years, the last 3 years, with top 5 yardage defenses. I honestly think if you were to take what Mike Zimmer has done the last 5 years and say, all right, everything's the same, except instead of Sam Bradford or instead of second-year Teddy Bridgewater or instead of Kirk Cousins, you get Drew Brees. We'd be talking about maybe multiple Super Bowl trips in this case. And we certainly wouldn't be debating whether or not they should add a year to his contract.
Those
right?
are great numbers, a very strong resume, and an even better hypothetical that you lay out there, Phil. But
Thank you. We'll go to break now. We appreciate that, everybody.
Did you say hypothetical?
yes,
Appreciate that.
that doesn't exist in a vacuum. And I do think that the money that you just shelled out to Kirk Cousins plays a part in this in terms of the urgency that the franchise feels, and the job security of Rick Spielman plays into this, and the decision as to whether or not you keep Mike Zimmer throughout the rest of this season. When you signed Kirk Cousins, you pushed all your chips to the center of the table, saying, we're going to win a Super Bowl in the next 3 years. It's do or die in the next 3 years with Kirk Cousins, because you spent that type of money on one guy. And then you look at Rick Spielman, and he's looking at potentially sitting on the hot seat himself. And if I'm Rick Spielman and we're 10 games into the season and my playoff hopes are hanging by a thread, and the feeling in the locker room isn't great and it's not brimming with confidence, maybe I pull the trigger and put Gary Kubiak in there in hopes that we salvage this season, make the playoffs, and I get another year as the GM of the Minnesota Vikings.
You're just angling for a write that down prediction to be correct, really. This is propaganda by Rami Makloff.
Well, partly. I think to your point, I think to Rami's point, though, what's important here is if Cousins doesn't work, everybody's gone. I don't think Rick survives. I don't think Mike gets through this thing.
Is that fair?
No, but by its nature, it's not. Sports is not fair.
Fair is the wrong question.
Not fair.
You're right. So fair is the wrong question. Is that
a wise way to operate?
Right. Should that be the thing? Like, all right, we're in a spot where everything's ready to click, and this is the best quarterback on the market, and let's make a run.
You know what this is? This is an example of how damn hard it is to find a quarterback and how much pressure and panic teams are to do it. Yeah. So that's because Kirk Cousins, is it fair? Is it wise to pay him what they're paying him? Guaranteed? Absolutely not. We've seen a year of that guy. And you know what? I don't think he's terrible, but you would not go back right now and say same contract. Not in a million years. I think what this is this is exhibit A of how difficult it is to find a competent to very good player at this spot, and it is the most probably difficult position to identify and find a success story in sports.
I mean, if they didn't make the playoffs 2 straight years, and with him having that quarterback for 2 years, like you said, it's hard for a coach to win without having the same quarterback and some sort of consistency at that position and quality consistency at that position. To me, not making the playoffs for 2 years with the quarterback you just spent nearly $30 million a year on, I do have to wonder if you're the head coach to take us where we're trying to go. Wouldn't you?
I would wonder more about Rick Spielman in that instance than Mike Zimmer if they also tacked on a top 5 yardage defense again, and it was just decided that, took a flyer on a quarterback that his numbers were more fantasy numbers and it didn't really work. I mean, let's put it this way. Let's say they don't make the playoffs, but it's not a 4-12 season. The Vikings pretty rarely have those 4-12, 3-13 type seasons. They're always knocking on the door, even if they're not a playoff team. Let's say they go 8-8 and they miss the playoffs, and it's still a damn good defense. It's the 5th best defense in the NFL, and it's just kind of more of the same from Kirk Cousins. You're not terrible, but you're not beating teams in prime time. You're not winning big games. Am I looking to fire Mike Zimmer for that? I would need to know that, and again, he's not Andy Reid, because Andy Reid's been doing it for 20 years. But if I'm going to fire Andy Reid and say, well, hey, man, you're not doing enough in the postseason for us, I would need to know that it's Doug Peterson that's replacing him. Okay. And not just like, well, let's lick our finger and stick it in the wind and try and find somebody.
Let's say you're right. Let's say 8-8, miss the playoffs, defense is good. Do you fire Rick and not Mike? Do you get a new GM?
I don't think someone has to be fired if that happens. But we do that so much in sports.
It's because it happens.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not that we do it.
That's the norm.
That's the nature of the business.
And by the way,
no, but I'm saying if it's me and I get the option, if I'm Ziggy Wilf, am I firing people if they don't make the playoffs? Just because you got to fire someone.
You know what? I think if I paid Cousins that much and it doesn't work in 2 years, I think I might be. I just paid a guy. I just broke the bank and gave a guy a guaranteed contract in a league where this doesn't happen. I think someone's going to pay, but it might not be Mike.
Well, there's a difference between someone is going to pay and if you were in that seat, you would make someone pay. Because I agree with you guys. Someone's getting fired if they don't make the playoffs. I'm not naive.
Here's my question, and this is going to be damn near impossible to find out, but I'd love to know this. The Vikings' biggest free agent acquisition for the 2019 offseason will not be a player. It's Kubiak. I bet you Kubiak broke the bank. I bet you they're paying him a lot of money, because there's no salary cap there. And basically what they're trying to do is say, okay, if we can't get Mike Shanahan to coach Cousins, who is as close to Mike as possible, and it's Kubiak. So if this doesn't work offensively and you don't get where you want to go and you're paying all these people, including the quarterback and the assistant head coach offense that much, at some point in time, if you're the Wolves, I think you say, gentlemen, what's happened here?
Yeah. But I think just like my general stance here is we get the fire everyone train rolling in sports. And it just becomes I think we should take a step back and say Mike Zimmer's been a damn good coach. It's not Bill Belichick, but you shouldn't fire someone because they're not Bill Belichick. You know who he also isn't? Joe Philbin. Okay, you could be stuck with like there's 10. He's not Doug Marrone.
But teams don't think like that.
They should.
I get your point, but they don't think like that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm not advocating for the firing of Mike Zimmer or anybody else just because they don't make the playoffs. I'd have to see how the season played out to evaluate Mike Zimmer and tell you if he should have his job after the 2019 season. In my opinion, I'm just saying based on the way that NFL teams tend to operate, I don't think he will have his job if this team doesn't make the playoffs, and I don't think he'll last throughout the season if we get to week 8 or week 10 and this thing is not going the way that Ziggy Wilf and Rick Spielman were hoping that it would go.
I have one more Mike Zimmer thought experiment real quick for you guys.
Okay.
So there were 8 new head coaches hired by new teams this past Black Friday or Black Monday period. So Cliff Kingsbury, Zach Taylor, Freddie Kitchens, some great names. Vic Fangio just sounds football, right?
And defense coming from Chicago.
Just mustache. And does he have a mustache?
No, he doesn't.
I think he should.
He should though. Yeah,
he should have a mustache.
He sounds like a Bears guy.
Yeah.
He does.
He does. He's an SNL skit. So Matt LaFleur, Brian Flores, Adam Gase, Bruce Arians. Is there anyone in that group, include Bruce Arians is established, is there anyone in that group that you would put ahead of Mike Zimmer and say, yep, that's a definitively better coach than Mike Zimmer?
No, maybe Bruce Arians, but no, I mean, none of the rest of those guys have the track record for me to go out and say that.
I think if Mike gets fired, though, I don't think it's a result necessarily of Mike being Mike. I think if Mike gets fired, it's probably a strategic shift from defense. We hired for defense, and the league has gone completely to the opposite side of the ball. So I don't know that it would be a personality fire as much as it would be a philosophical fire, right?
Well, Matt
LaFleur, prime example. I mean, he's got experience, the OC in Tennessee for 1 year, but now they think he can work with
Sean McVay before that. Though,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they had lunch one time, actually, is what it was.
McDonald's, right. I think, right?
So I don't know if I would put Arians definitively above Zimmer. They're both kind of in a similar category. So that's 8 coaches. Kyle Shanahan, jury's still out. He's a hot name. Pat Shurmur, jury's still out. Let me know if you'd put any of these guys above Mike Zimmer.
I might take Shanahan.
I could be talked into that.
Just based on what I've seen him do with a couple of quarterbacks.
Shurmur, no way, because I don't think that he should be.
What about current Jon Gruden? I'm taking Mike Zimmer over current Jon Gruden.
Press conferences would be epic, though.
We'd have some fun with that.
Well, in terms of that, I'll take Jon Gruden.
Right.
100%. But in terms of, do you want to win football games in 2019? Mike Zimmer,
Yeah,
Jon
no,
Gruden?
it's not.
It's Mike Zimmer, right?
All right, fine.
All right, Matt Patricia, pretty easy, right?
Show some respect.
Sean McDermott with the Bills.
Show some damn respect, would you?
Doug Marrone.
No.
Mike Vrabel, Tennessee.
I like Mike Vrabel.
Dan Quinn. I mean, my point here is he's one of the 10 best head coaches in the NFL. Unless there's guys on their couches you think are like, well, why is that guy on his? Is Bill Parcells coming back? He's one of the 10 best head coaches in the world.
And you're speaking logically, but I don't know teams think that way. I mean, that's the problem.
That's what we're saying.
And no team says there, but for the grace of God, go us, and we're going to hire the next Matt Patricia. They're like trying to go raid the Patriots because they think that they can. Look at all the teams. If you want an example of this league and the mind bleeped up nature of this league, look at how many teams have taken swings at the Patriot staff. Like, that's the guy from the Patriot staff.
Right.
Like, and we've gone through the list before.
Yeah.
It's embarrassingly bad.
How many times do you have to have your hand lit on fire holding it over a stovetop?
No, Matt Patricia, he's going to work.
What if Matt Patricia is just like, what if we overreacted to his first year and he's a mad scientist. He's just molding a bad franchise.
Practicing outside before indoor games.
I know.
But you know what? Matt Patricia is constantly in my head lecturing me about my posture. Now that I'm on camera.
And by the way, Purple Daily today? Purple Daily, you were great.
I know. I'm working on it.
Were you sitting up at attention?
I'm telling you, yes.
He was
sucking in the belly, shoulders back. And
you're wearing black?
Yep.